This is a TV show called Pagan Invasion. This released back in, I think, 1994 on VHS. This episode is titled Evolution from Physics to Metaphysics. It's basically an anti-evolution, pro-creationism episode. Absolutely bizarre stuff, man. The first episode, I covered this like months ago, but it's basically about how evil Halloween and paganism are. It's really fascinating if you want to go back and watch it. This is part 2. If you don't want to see the other, don't sweat it. This stands independently of the rest. You don't have to see the other to understand what's happening. I'll provide context if it's missing. But in the last one, they basically spent the entire time playing the persecution game about how young Earth creationists who refuse to accept that evolution is a fact are being persecuted in the school system because they're not allowed to teach creationism, like young Earth creationism alongside evolution. So let's continue on, see what these guys have to say for themselves. This is bound to be ridiculous. And while we do that, we're going to play some Final Fantasy VII.
I asked him about evolution, its history, and its impact on education.
Evolution is man's perspective on the origin, the history of the universe, and the origin and history of life.
No, it's scientific information about where our species came from and how we came to be in the first place. That's actually what it is, but okay.
And really it's an attempt to explain away a supernatural explanation for the beginning of all things. So
look, you want to use supernatural explanations? Fine, be my guest. I don't care. Why would I care about that? Claim that God kicked evolution into existence. That's fine with me. But evolution most definitely happened.
Man attempts to come up with his perspective of why we're here, where we've come from in the past.
Who were some of the founding fathers of this evolutionary thought?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that the founding fathers were not overwhelmed with facts which caused them to question the reality of a creator. They were individuals who were looking for an explanation to explain away God the Creator. They didn't want to have to rely upon a supernatural event as the beginning of all things that exist in the universe.
That has nothing to do with anything at all. This is completely made up.
The key individuals was a man by the name of Erasmus Darwin, who was actually Charles Darwin's grandfather. The interesting thing is that his views seem to be directly related to some of the Eastern mystical views. In fact, he headed up a group which he called the Lunar Society.
See, this is something you find a lot among evangelical anti-evolution types of people. They want to turn their opponents into a religious movement. Like we heard earlier, humanism is a religion, started as a religion, all that other garbage that they spread. They need to turn it into a religion because that means if you believe any component of it, any pieces of this, you're committing heresy. You are failing God and you will go to hell if you accept any of this, or if your children accept any of this. It isn't just a difference of opinion anymore. This is a religious mandate. You must accept that evolution is wrong.
They met once a month on the full moon, hence the name Lunar Society, and some metaphysical Eastern ideas were actually incorporated into his beliefs. And Erasmus Darwin wrote 2 books called the Zoonomia, in which he laid out his view on the origin and history of life, that life came into existence from non-life and then progressed and developed over time from low...
Dude, is any of this even true? I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it's completely made up. I have no idea.
Lower levels of complexity to higher levels of complexity. Another significant founding father would be Charles Lyell. He's been called the father of uniformitarianism, or the belief that the Earth is billions of years old and that the layers of the Earth were laid down gradually over very long periods of time.
Dude, this is all straight from Kent Hovind's repertoire. Like, it sounds exactly like the kind of thing that I've heard from Kent Hovind a billion times. I have a breakdown of a bunch of Hovind videos on my channel, by the by, if you want to see them, on my unfiltered channel.
His whole objective was to explain away the view that there had ever been a catastrophic global biblical flood in the past.
There's no way to explain that that actually took place, so no one needs to explain it away. There's no evidence to support it. It's completely made up. There was no global flood. Are you kidding me? They're like, I'm not going to insult him. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to. First of all, if I insult them, I'm no better than them. And second, there are probably a lot of people who are listening right now who believe the exact same way they do. And by insulting them, I am insulting the people who may otherwise hear what I have to say by proxy. So, no insults. I was going to say they're like children, but that's not fair. You know, I believed this stuff too when I was a teenager. I believed all this garbage. You've got to look at the facts and recognize that they're completely full of shit.
And so his view was that these layers or strata were laid down gradually, uniformly over long periods. And
that's true.
And as a result was then able to cast doubt on the authenticity of a global flood, which the Bible talks about.
Yeah, the Bible does talk about that. That's true. But it talked about that specifically in books that were written in a certain specific genre that was not intended to be taken literally. You know, when the Bible was written, when various different books were written, there were different types of genres back then that we don't have now. Like apocalyptic genre, for example. You know, we have comedy, we have fantasy, sci-fi, romance, so on and so forth. Back then, they had apocalyptic genre and others. They were not meant to be taken literally. They were meant to tell stories in veiled ways. But, you know, I guess just completely ignore all of the historical information behind it, I suppose.
The major founding father of evolution would be Charles Darwin himself, who popularized the idea that life could be traced to a common ancestor, a simple form of life that then developed and progressed over long periods of time to bring about the existence of every form of life which we see on the earth today.
Have today's educators actually advanced the theory of evolution in a systematic, formal agenda?
I believe so, Carol. As you look back through the history of education, and specifically the last 40 or 50 years, there literally has been a program to use the public schools to advance evolution without being challenged by any alternative views on this subject of origins. And really, when you look at this, you see that there's some key individuals who propagated an idea back in the 1930s, who actually wrote up an agenda called the Humanist Manifesto, which basic objective was to advance evolution and to question the reality that there is a creator.
Oh boy, the word manifesto, that's pretty scary, huh? I don't even know if any of this is true. Don't believe a word out of their mouths.
Some very interesting individuals were part of this organization. You've heard of John Dewey, who is called the modern father of progressive education, one of the most influential individuals in education in North America. He was a signer of this humanist.
I've never heard of this guy before. They're acting like he's some kind of a monster of some sort. I don't know. And if you notice, the picture that they put up of him looks like Hitler in a lot of ways. Like it's kind of framed up in such a way that he looks like Hitler. That's probably intentional, I would imagine. This is pure unadulterated propaganda.
Who is called the modern father of progressive education, one of the most influential individuals in education in North America. He was a signer of this Humanist Manifesto, along with another gentleman by the name of Francis Potter. An interesting quote could be gleaned from a book that Francis Potter wrote in 1930 called Humanism, a New Religion. He stated, "Education is thus a powerful ally of humanism. What can a theistic Sunday school meeting for an hour once a week and teaching only a fraction of the children do to stem the tide of the 5-day program of humanistic teaching?" So it was literally the objective of some of these individuals to use the schools to advance their belief in man, which is based on humanistic belief, which is basically a religion, and to use evolution as the
which is basically a religion. You catch that little thing he slipped in just now?
means of explaining away a creator.
Have teachers who promote another theory of the origin of life been suppressed or opposed in any way?
Oh my God, yes, non-stop. Are you kidding me? They just mentioned the Scopes monkey trial earlier in 1925. That's a perfect example. Dude didn't even teach about evolution, and he was put on trial and found guilty and charged the equivalent of like $1,500 or something. Yes, Yes, of course they've been suppressed since the dawn of time. You must be joking with this.
That is actually a fact, Carol. As you look back over the last 10 years, there literally has been an organized agenda to advance evolution and to suppress anyone who would come up with a creationist perspective, labeling a belief in creation as religion and the belief in evolution as something which is science.
That's accurate. Yes, exactly. Correct.
Actually, in 1981, there was a meeting that was held in Washington, D.C., where the National Academy of Sciences, along with the National Association of Biology Teachers, because they were concerned that evolution was not being advanced quickly enough and that creationism was presenting itself in the schools, in the public schools, together decided that they would come up with some kind of a strategy to attack the creationist movement. And this meeting, you can read about it.
Like, they have the strongest persecution complex I've ever seen in my life. They are convinced that they are the victims in every situation, when they are literally the victimizers. They are the ones that are causing problems for everybody else and refusing to accept basic scientific facts.
In a science publication, Science Volume 214, November 6th, 1981, describes some of the people who were at the meeting and what their objectives were. And Frank Press, who was the head of the National Academy of Sciences, then was instructed that he should meet with influential people to see what they could do to stop creationism from being presented in the public schools. And it's interesting that
So I guess he's giving examples of creationists pushing back against evolution in the classroom. Is that what he's doing right now? I would be embarrassed to give these examples if I were him, but okay.
Years later, in the state of California, for example, there has been an agenda to try to improve the quality of science education by allowing only evolution to be presented in the science classrooms with no mention whatsoever of an alternate view based on creation. And I'm sure you've seen some...
There shouldn't be an alternate view based on creation because it's nonsense. There is no... It's not an alternate view. It's garbage. At this point in time, they didn't have, oh my God, I forgot the name of it again. I spent like 5 minutes trying to remember the name of this earlier, and suddenly I've forgotten it again. Irreducible complexity. Yeah, they came up with this idea of irreducible complexity. Maybe they hadn't come up with it yet at this point in time when this video came out in like 94, but it's about as close as they could possibly come to having some level of scientific anything at all to point back to creation. The idea of irreducible complexity is the fact that you have component parts of, say, bacteria that couldn't have possibly evolved without each other, right? Like, how does a chicken manage to fly without having any wings? Like, how did the ability to fly evolve in the first place? I mean, there are explanations for all of this. Irreducible complexity is complete garbage too, but it is as close as creationists ever came to seriously challenging evolution in a court of law. And there was a case, evolution versus intelligent design, also. And it failed. It fell flat, of course, because they were wrong from the very beginning. Irreducible complexity is as close as they ever came to having any kind of scientific legitimacy, and that fell flat too.
Some of the new curriculums, science framework, which is just put out by the California Department of Education, which basically states that in order to teach life science, earth science, astronomy, evolution should be a fundamental central concept of the curriculum. Evolution, which Darwin described as descent with modification, is the central organizing principle in life science. So evolution is being promoted as science.
It is science.
And that it shouldn't be questioned, that it is as much a fact as gravity.
Roger, are there any other key individuals who have organized a campaign to discredit creationism or creationists?
There are many individuals, but let me just mention a few. One of the most important individuals who has done everything he can, is zealous against the creation movement, is a man by the name of Isaac Asimov. Of course, well-known science.
Oh my God, Isaac Asimov. I love it, dude. The guy, you talking the guy that wrote the Foundation book series. He's just a sci-fi writer. Are you kidding me? Wow, I can't believe that they were attacking Isaac Asimov at the time. I had no idea that he was like what would you call it? Like an enemy within religious circles. That's super fascinating, actually. Check this out. Here's a fun little fact you may not have known about Asimov. Did you know that L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, got into a bar bet with another guy over whether or not he could start a religion for profit? L. Ron Hubbard bet this guy that he'd be able to sucker poor fools out of their money by creating a religion. There's very little hard evidence of this bar bet ever taking place. It's kind of hard to track down. But you know who was there to witness it and vouches for it? Isaac Asimov. Isaac Asimov was there and says, yes, in fact, this did happen. This is true. That is some shit, right? Is that just me? I'm honestly fascinated by it. Isaac Asimov is fucking awesome. I love that dude to death. He was a writer around the same time that L. Ron Hubbard was, and all of the others who wrote pulp fiction. That's what it was called, because it was written on cheap paper called pulp. And they wrote so much. It was crazy. I think L. Ron Hubbard has the record for like the most books ever written or something like that, because that's how he made money. You know, he'd just write and write and write and write. Every day he was putting something new out. The most books published or something. Crazy.
Who has done everything he can, is zealous against the creation movement, is a man by the name of Isaac Asimov. Of course, well-known science fiction writer. He is a signer of the Humanist Manifesto in an updated 1973 version. After the 1981 meeting in Washington, D.C., Isaac Asimov wrote an article called...
Why is he saying Isaac Asimov? It's Isaac Asimov.
...called The Dangerous Myth of Creationism, in which he basically says that those who believe in a creationist view are dangerous to our society today because they are literally trying to push a belief in society that there is a creator, that there is a God, and they're pushing science back into the Dark Ages.
Yeah, okay, I can agree with that one. Sure, yeah, I'm down. I think I'm with him on that one. Young Earth creationists are a blight on society. Absolutely, they're terrible in every way. Does that mean that, like, I want them to, like, die or something? Of course not. But they're most definitely damaging to society. I don't know how you could, like, see anything any other way. It's ridiculous.
And these individuals, like Asimov, believe that if we implement a view in our public schools, an alternative view to evolution, that our children's education is going to be destroyed. There are countless examples of individuals, qualified individuals, that have either lost positions or tenure, have been fired simply because they're not willing to go along with the world evolutionary view and stating...
You mean because they're not willing to actually teach the curriculum as they've been instructed to? Yeah, you're right. They are being, if they're going to refuse to teach children what the state believes they should be taught, what the scientific consensus is that they should be taught, they shouldn't have a job. Absolutely, I agree.
That the facts support evolution. They'll say that the facts don't support evolution, and as a result of that, they are removed from their positions. Let me give you a couple of examples. Forrest Mims, a well-qualified science writer with Scientific American, recently removed from his position because it was found out that he believed in a creationist perspective, although he had not written articles.
That's BS. Nobody has been removed from their position because of what they believed. Nonsense. That would be like one of the largest lawsuits in existence if that had happened. And it would be wrong. That's a thought crime. That never happened. I challenge you to prove me otherwise. When I say I challenge you to prove me otherwise, what I mean is you just made an absolute batshit insane claim, and you have the burden of proof. So is he going to give us evidence? He's in a TV show right now where he could easily provide evidence, right? They could throw up news articles, they could throw up court cases or whatever that I could use as a resource to look this shit up. Is that what they're going to do, you think? Do you think they're going to provide evidence that this guy was fired from his job as a teacher for believing something? Let's see.
Just recently in the Capistrano Unified School District in Southern California, a public school teacher, high school teacher, because he was teaching that there were facts that didn't support evolution, was being attacked by other biology teachers and by superintendents that say that he cannot continue teaching the way he's teaching because of the new science curriculum, which says that evolution must be advanced without any opposition.
That's complete garbage. Nobody would ever say any of that. This is all pure, unadulterated propaganda.
Institute of Creation Research, of course, well known around the world for advancing a creationist view based on scientific observable evidence, has come
I've never heard of it before.
under attack by the California Board of Education, claiming that they do not teach evolution properly and therefore could not be accredited as a private institution. So you can see there's all kinds of major confrontations which are occurring. Evolution is being advanced, and a belief that there's a creator is being attacked and literally abolished from the school system.
Good. That's how it should be. You know, if they want to teach about creationism in like a religious studies class or whatever, alongside, you know, Muslim history and Buddhist history and all that other shit, fine. Go nuts in religious history class with the other religious histories, not in science class.
Teaching our children to think logically and to think clearly. Isn't this the job of our educational system?
Yes, that's what's happening right now. You see how they're twisting it around to be something other than it is, right?
Teaching our children to think logically and to think clearly. Isn't this the job of our educational system?
Yes, it is, and that's why you're not allowed within 500 feet of children. I don't know if that's true about it. It's probably not true about the guy. I'm just saying. He shouldn't be allowed anywhere near a classroom, honestly. He shouldn't be allowed to teach anybody anything. He has no idea what he's talking about.
Yet as the result of the exclusive teaching of evolution, students' sense of logic must be discarded. For example, if the intricately precise design of a Swiss watch is the result of a designer, what about, say, the human eye?
Okay, this is called the Watchmaker argument, and this is actually really common in religious circles, particularly among people like Kirk Cameron. He did a whole bit on this. That's the guy on the right here. Ray Comfort is on the left, and they did this whole hilarious thing about the eye and the banana. Okay, let's just, I'll show you. Just listen to what they had to say here, and you'll see what I mean.
And I've since learned that when you really look at the evidence, the truth is it takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to believe in God. You've really got to ignore the facts. It's funny how we equate the word atheism with intellectual, when it's the exact opposite. That's right. Kirk, I have an intellectually stimulating theory. It's my theory of where the soda can may have come from.
So here is his example of the, what do you call it, like the Watchmaker argument.
Millions of years ago, there was a big bang in space. Nobody knows what caused the big bang. It just happened. And from this bang issued this huge rock. On top of the rock was found a sweet, brown, bubbly substance. And over millions of years, aluminum crept up the side, formed itself in a can, then a lid, and then a tab. And then millions of years later, red paint, blue paint, white paint fell from the sky and formed itself into the words, 12 fluid ounces, do not litter. You're saying, what are you doing? You're insulting my intellect. And so I am. Because we know if the can is made, there must be a maker.
Okay, that's an interesting argument. Well, first of all, that's not how evolution happened. We have a complete and full understanding of exactly how evolution happens on a daily basis. This isn't like a mystery, and it doesn't work the way that he's describing here either. And second, hypothetically, if he was correct about this, if this did imply the existence of a god, hypothetically, it doesn't, but if it did, it wouldn't imply the existence of his God. It wouldn't mean that Jesus came to die for your sins or any of that. Could have been an alien species that came along and created human beings, for all we know. Like, there are a billion options to this, right? This is the Watchmaker fallacy at its most basic. I'm sorry, it's not a fallacy. This is the Watchmaker argument at its most basic. The claim that we stumble upon a watch, on the beach, and we know that it was made by somebody, so we should make the same assumption about humans. Even if it were true, it doesn't mean that we were made by Yahweh or whatever. There's actually a whole Wikipedia page dedicated to explaining the problems with the Watchmaker fallacy. Or, I'm sorry, it's not a fallacy. I keep calling it that. The Watchmaker argument. Okay, this is apparently written by a guy named William Paley, Natural Theology, 1802. In crossing a heath, I suppose I pitched my foot against a stone and were asked how the stone came to be there. I might possibly answer that, for anything I knew to the contrary, it had lain there forever. Nor would it perhaps be very easy to show the absurdity of this answer. But suppose I'd found a watch upon the ground, and it should be inquired how the watch happened to be in that place. I should hardly think of the answer I had before given, that for everything I knew, the watch might have always been there. For there must have existed at some time, and at some place or other, an artificer of artificers, who formed the watch for the purpose which we find it actually to answer, who comprehended its construction and designed its use, every indication of contrivance, every manifestation of design which existed in the watch exists in the works of nature. So that's the Watchmaker analogy, basically. Richard Dawkins' response to this was, he saw Paley, which is the quote that I just read was from a guy named Paley, as having made an incorrect proposal as to a certain problem's solution. But Dawkins did not disrespect him. In his essay, The Big Bang, Steven Pinker discusses Dawkins' coverage of Paley's argument, adding, biologists today do not agree with Paley's laying out of the problem. They disagree only with his solution. In his book, The God Delusion, Dawkins argues that life was a result of complex biological processes. He is an evolutionary biologist, Dawkins is. He makes the argument that the comparison to the lucky construction of a watch is fallacious because proponents of evolution do not consider evolution lucky. Rather than luck, the evolution of human life is the result of billions of years of natural selection. He concludes that evolution is a fair contestant to replace God in the role of watchmaker. In addition, he argues that the watchmaker's creation of the watch implies that the watchmaker must be more complex than the watch. Design is top-down. Someone or something more complex designed something less complex. To follow the line upwards demands that the watch was designed by a necessarily more complex watchmaker. The watchmaker must have been created by a more complex being than himself. So the question becomes, who designed the designer? Dawkins argues that A, this line continues ad infinitum, and B, it does not explain anything. Evolution, on the other hand, takes a bottom-up approach. It explains how complexity can arise gradually by building on or combining lesser complexity. That is what evolution is. That's how evolution works. It builds on complexity. It's a bottom-up thing, not a top-down thing, like creating something is. So, anyways, that's the idea behind the watchmaker analogy, not fallacy, analogy. I keep falsely calling it a fallacy rather than an analogy. My mistake. Anyways, let's keep listening to these people. See what else they have to say here.
Is it logical to assume that the eye had no designer?
Yes, because it was a bottom-up thing and it evolved independently at least a minimum of 5 different times in nature. It's not like every eye-having creature evolves from the same creature. That's not how it played out. The eye independently evolved 5 different times. Or the photosensor or whatever.
Even though it is billions of times more intricate and precise in its design than a watch? And what about the DNA code found in each living cell? The purpose of that code is to prevent one life form from changing into another type of life form.
The purpose of the DNA code is to prevent it from turning into another? What? I haven't heard anything about that. What's this dude talking about right now? I'm completely lost on this argument. No, that's not what the point of DNA is. The whole point of DNA is to create proteins in a very specific pattern, which then creates life. Now, sometimes that DNA duplicates pieces, like strands. They duplicate. They just full on add pieces to itself that are just duplicates of each other. Gene mutation comes into the mix through selection, through reproduction, or just, random mutations. Like that happens from time to time. From my understanding, babies have an average of around 70 new mutations that the parents did not have. That's new information that did not exist before. That could be inaccurate, so you're going to want to double check that before quoting me on it, but I looked this up not too long ago, and I believe that was the result that I found. Over time, those mutations can either be good or they can be bad. The mutations that happen that are bad, that person won't live long enough or won't reproduce as much as the person who has good mutations that are beneficial and helpful and contribute to, flourishing and reproducing even more. That's how this whole system works. A system of gene duplication, which every creature that has DNA on planet Earth does, gene duplication, gene mutations through reproduction and other means, and natural selection, sexual selection, artificial selection. There are a billion different types of selections. That's how it all works.
And yet, evolution is based on the idea that life forms must change into other types of life forms. Is that logical? Students are taught evolution as fact from kindergarten through university. Scientific evidence.
Students are not taught evolution in kindergarten. They are taught evolution in, I think, high school, maybe? I'm not even sure. I don't know when they start teaching it. I didn't learn evolution in high school. I had to learn it on my own.
Making evolution look bad is not permitted, and no opposing views on origins are allowed.
That's complete nonsense.
Should other concepts of how life got started be taught in the public schools? I don't think creationism should, because creationism is...
Dude, who is this guy? Geologist? Nicholas Houghton. Okay.
Should other concepts of how life got started be taught in the public schools? I don't think creationism should, because creationism is a thinly disguised religious doctrine, which has got no...
It's not even thinly disguised. That's accurate. It is just a straight-up religious doctrine.
...place in the separation of church and state.
The main issue that is always raised in opposition to teaching all the scientific evidence on the subject of origins is that it violates separation of church and state to teach evidence that doesn't happen to support evolution.
People should simply be able to hear the truth. A fact is a fact. You don't throw it out just because it happens to agree with the Bible.
That's accurate. Absolutely. You wouldn't throw a fact out just because it disagrees with the Bible. Unfortunately, that's not furthering his goal of getting creationism taught in schools if we didn't throw facts out. I mean, we're not throwing facts out because they agree with the Bible. What's he even talking about? Larry McLean? I've never heard of this guy before. What?
That doesn't make it religious.
Teaching a theory of creation is constitutional because the Constitution was written in the context of the Declaration of Independence, which refers to creation.
Wow. Okay, hold on. Let's listen to this one more time. Let's just step back a little bit. Listen to this again. Listen to this argument.
Teaching a theory of creation is constitutional because the Constitution...
Okay, no, it's not constitutional. Teaching creationism has nothing to do with the Constitution. Actually, it's opposed to the Constitution because it would be favoring one religion over another. So it is directly in opposition to the first sentence in the First Amendment of the Constitution. So let's hear his explanation for why it's actually correct to teach it, even though it's expressly forbidden.
Because the Constitution was written in the context of the Declaration of Independence.
The fuck does that mean? Written in the context of the Declaration of Independence? What? What does he even mean by that? The reason he had to say that in the first place is because the Constitution mentions the creator a total of 0 times. It doesn't mention a creator at all. he has to bring up the Declaration of Independence because it mentions a creator in a context of where our rights came from, i.e., our rights did not come from government. They came from somewhere else, and government government isn't in a position to take them away. That's the idea. I don't know what he means by it was written in the context of the Declaration of Independence, but even the Declaration of Independence was not written in support of creationism. It's just garbage. All of it. So he says it was written in the context of the Declaration of Independence, which is the only other founding document, I guess. It's not even a founding document. It's just a letter to King George telling him to go fuck himself, basically. That's the only one that really mentions a creator in any context at all. So, matter of fact, the founding fathers were very opposed to a state church existing in the first place. They didn't want anything to do with the state church. They left England to escape that shit, in large part. There's one of the reasons they left England. Because there's a state church, and it was miserable having absolutely no choice over, like, what religion you had or whatever other thing. It just sucks. So they came here to protect themselves and give themselves the option of being whatever they wanted to be. And here we have a prime example of people trying to force others into it once again.
Louisiana and Arkansas were the first states to pass laws mandating balanced treatment for both theories.
Of course they were. Why am I not surprised by that? Arkansas and Louisiana, is that who they said? Yeah, that checks out.
It was agreed that only scientific data minus religious doctrines be presented in the classrooms.
The Louisiana legislature in 1981 passed a law for, quote, balanced treatment of creation science and evolution. The law also defined what evolution is, quote, scientific evidence supporting evolution. It defined what creation science is, quote, scientific evidence supporting creation.
Immediately, aggressive litigation was put into action by a powerful organization which is firmly directed against traditional Judeo-Christian principles. The influential ACLU, or
ACLU is fantastic. The ACLU doesn't just defend, like, atheists or whatever. They aren't even an atheist organization. A Jewish lawyer from the ACLU back in, I think, the 1970s defended KKK members' right to march through a heavily Jewish area because it was a civil liberty. It was a right that people have to peacefully protest. That's how much the ACLU cares about civil rights. If you hate the if you hate the ACLU like these people seem to, the problem is on your end, not on the ACLU's end. It's on you.
American Civil Liberties Union, equipped with over 500 active attorneys, invested huge amounts of money and successfully protested the law.
One of the biggest problems you have with the ACLU is that they're so well funded.
They really aren't. They're not well funded at all. They need more money, actually.
Millions and millions of dollars from large foundations and from wealthy people all across America. That's what they did to us. They tied us up in court in Louisiana.
We filed,
as they deserved. This is a violation of people's rights. So you can expect the ACLU to come after you for that kind of thing, of course.
A slim brief of 630 pages with 2,000 footnotes.
Welcome to law. Is this your first day being a lawyer? You have no idea how much lawyers read. This is standard, okay? This isn't even surprising to see a humongous heckin' brief like this. This is run-of-the-mill shit, all right? I don't want to hear any of the complaining. You don't want to deal with all this? Don't be a lawyer.
Arguing that creation science is constitutional to teach, scientific in content, and as non-religious as evolution.
Oh, wow. So so this brief that he just dropped on the table here is actually arguing in favor of creationism. Fantastic. Absolutely great.
The U.S. District Court judge entered a summary judgment against us nonetheless, saying that creation science involves the concept of creation, which implies a creator, which is inherently religious.
Yes, exactly. And not only does it imply a creator, but it implies their creator very specifically. It implies a Christian God, because a ton of creation, even a ton of Christian denominations, not just other religions, not just like, Islam or Buddhism or whatever, but a ton of other religion or other denominations accept evolution as not a problem. It's not just Christianity, but it's evangelicalism, it's Pentecostalism specifically that they're promoting. It's even narrowed down to a very specific church, practically.
The ACLU was able to convince the Supreme Court that creation science was basically religious. The court
That's correct. It is. It's religious.
Violated the Constitution by redefining the First Amendment author's intention, which is against favoring any one religion above another.
Oh my God, you hear what they just said? Listen to this again.
It was basically religious. The court violated the Constitution.
The court violated the Constitution. Okay, how'd they do that?
By redefining the First Amendment author's intention, which is...
I love it. Okay, so you're telling me that the court who decided on the Second Amendment, meaning that everybody has a right to bear arms, who completely ignored that little section there that talks about having a well-regulated militia, forgot those 3 words. You telling me the court that reinterpreted the Second Amendment violated the Constitution by doing so? No, bro. They're judges, okay? They have the right to reinterpret the Constitution any way they want. That's the nature of their power, all right? And you can tell me you don't think that common law should exist, which that's what that is, common law, legislating from the bench, basically. Laws that are established by the court system. You can tell me you don't think that should exist, but okay, that's fine, I guess. That's an argument. I didn't know you wanted to live in Soviet Russia, who doesn't have common law. But, I'm not a communist or socialist. I didn't know you were, but all right.
Is against favoring any one religion above another. In their decision, the Supreme Court favored naturalistic evolution, a belief of religious humanists.
No, they didn't favor naturalistic evolution or humanism. They favored the truth and the facts. That just so happens to have a liberal bias, so,
The scientific community is very seriously worried about the growth of creationism as an attack on the validity and the autonomy of science, and particularly in the insistence that creationism be taught in the public schools in science courses.
There's a very strong network and general feeling that creation, theories of creation, maybe theories of abrupt appearance, are...
There is no theory of creation. There's a hypothesis of creation at best. An idea that you came up with that you have no facts to substantiate. A theory is a well-defined scientific framework. Completely different.
A menace to science. Let me mention several organizations that actively today try to prevent it from being taught in public schools. Committees of Correspondence, People for the American Way, the American...
People for the American Way, interestingly enough, that's actually, that is now Right Wing Watch, effectively, or Right Wing Watch is like a spin-off organization from People for the American Way. So anytime you see like a Right Wing Watch video from me or a symbol in the corner or something, that's who they're talking about. Love it.
American Humanist Association, the American Civil Liberties Union.
That's the ACLU.
American Association for the Advancement of Science, the National Academy of Sciences, the National Education Association, the National Association of Biology Teachers.
Bro, you're just giving me a list of people to donate to right now, okay? I don't know what you think you're accomplishing here.
And the Biological Sciences Curriculum Study.
If there's one anti-scientific theory today that most threatens the whole nature of scientific inquiry, it is creationism.
Today we really have an organized conspiracy in this country, in every state, that is organized to fight the open hearing of scientific evidences on origins.
The result was the forming of a loose network of active organizations that will cooperate to combat the creationist intrusion.
Yeah, they're kind of making it out as though there's like a cabal, basically. What would you call it? Like a group of people at the top who are trying to pull strings like puppet masters to get what they want. As if videos like this don't exist in excess.
Well, what kind of training is that? What kind of stuff? These flash talks, I'm calling them flash talks, okay? What you're going to learn from this flash, how to go back to your house, wherever you live, and learn how to flip your school board so that your kids, if they're going to public school, you can start taking over the school board. And you go, well, that sounds like we're trying to take over the world. Yes, we are. I fully admit that. That's exactly what we're doing.
So it sounds to me like they scream and cry about it like they're children while actively attempting to do exactly what they're complaining about. This is not new. Okay, that's just the latest example of it. That one came out 2023. January 2023, that last clip I played from Gene Bailey, a TV show on Kenneth Copeland's TV network, the Victory Network. It's called Flashpoint. They've been trying to take over the world, quote unquote, for like ever. You need another example? How about this one? Check this out. This is Tony Perkins. He's the founder and leader of a think tank called Family Research Council, which is a group that Josh Duggar worked for a while.
I don't think we should abandon the public schools. I encourage young people who want to go into the teaching profession to see the public schools as a mission field. We cannot abandon it. We need to run for the school board. We need to be teachers. We need to be administrators, but we don't need to sacrifice our children in that environment. So I am not saying we abandon the public schools. Too many kids are going to continue to go there, but it shouldn't be our kids. We should send our kids as teachers and instructors.
Amen.
So there's an example of them trying to take over schools as mission fields. What about this one? Same guy, Family Research Council. Listen to what he has to say here. This one's from 2021.
We should be, happy warriors. We were created for this. It wasn't like this is just something that happens to fall upon us at this moment. Yeah. We were created to be warriors for Christ, especially as men. We're to lead our families as warriors. Now, that terminology has been maligned by the culture that we're, these, Christian warriors from a standpoint of we're trying to take over the world. Yeah, we are. The kingdom.
Yeah, from a
the kingdom of God.
Does he think that makes it any better? We're trying to take it over, yeah, but it's for God. That makes it worse. This has been their explicit stated goal for decades, okay? They have been fabricating ways to take over the country as Christian nationalists and turn it into a theocracy for like a long, long time now. And here we sit listening to these people complain about atheists doing it, quote unquote. Give me a break.
Into the public schools, public museums, national and state parks, and the governmental funding of science research. They have a very specific desire to preserve the exclusive teaching of evolution and to exclude any teaching of a scientific theory of creation or a scientific theory of abrupt appearance. That's censorship in my view.
We have today what is unquestionably...
Okay, that may be censorship in your view, but your view is incorrect, so I don't know what to tell you about that.
The worst case of censorship, good scientific data that happens to make it look bad for evolution, but that is meticulously censored from the textbooks.
In an American society where we have always taken great pride in freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of belief, freedom of press, it's just so unfortunate that we have such great censorship in our scientific community today.
Okay, there's no censorship, quote unquote, happening in the scientific community. If you have something to prove, you can submit it to a peer-reviewed journal, and the scientific community will examine it. They'll try to pull it apart. That's how it works. When you're acting as an agent of the state, you no longer have free speech. When you are acting as a representative of the U.S. government, when you become a teacher, for example, you don't have free speech. You have to respect other people's human rights because those people, those children, are there in a compulsory sense. They are required to be there legally. If they are not there, then their parents go to jail. This isn't freedom of speech. You don't have the right to say whatever you want when children are being forced to sit there and listen to what you have to say. You have to respect their human rights more than usual for that reason, okay? I don't want to hear any more of this garbage that they're violating your freedom of speech or whatever else. I hear this constantly from people. I hear this constantly from creationists. It's all about, like, making up fabricated persecution when they are actually the people attempting to persecute others. When they're actually the ones trying to make people's lives worse and take advantage of them. It's absolutely ridiculous. Well, I guess that was the end of that section. Absolutely absurd, dude. Absurd on every level. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments. I think this is ridiculous.